My driver's ed teacher when I was in high school only played Rush Limbaugh.
There you go.
I learned how to drive
Listening to Rush Limbaugh. And that's why you're such a good driver.
Hey, y'all, Sam Sanders here. Thank you so much for checking out my show, a show about entertainment. But this week, we're talking politics and how it might be changing entertainment. I'm really interested in how Trump's election and our last year of politics has changed the fun stuff that we might see in TV and in movies and online. For instance, there's two big examples of recent changes in TV and film that seem to be tied to our politics. The White Lotus killed a trans storyline, as did a Disney Pixar kids show. There's a lot of this going on, it seems. Changes in what we're seeing based on who's in the White House and who runs our politics. To talk about that, I have two amazing all-star guests who kind of cover this stuff for a living. Thank y'all for being here in your amazing sweaters. Tell folks who you are.
I'm Taylor Lorenz, and I'm a journalist and content creator covering internet culture.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm Lucas Shaw. I am in charge of media and entertainment coverage for Bloomberg, and I write a weekly newsletter called Screen Time.
And they're both going to leave their sweaters with me after
Yeah,
taping.
exactly.
I got to have it. So this is the big question that I want to frame this whole episode by. Entertainment with a big E, and I'm broad here. TV, movies, YouTube, streaming, etc. I feel like some of it is either quietly or very loudly moving to the right or becoming less, quote unquote, progressive in this current moment. Would y'all agree? Or is it more complicated than a yes or no answer?
I think it's more complicated than a yes or no answer. I think it is moving, or I think it has been moving for a couple of years. I don't think it is a response to Trump winning.
Okay.
I think that entertainment tends to reflect what people are interested in and what they want to watch.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think, for the most part, there are exceptions to this. I don't think that Hollywood studios or video game companies or content creators say, I need to present X political viewpoint. I think that they respond to what their viewers or listeners want, and that if they see that they are interested in something, and there has been a little bit of a rightward shift in our politics over the last couple of years, they then satisfy that.
Same question for you, Taylor. A lot of your work focuses on YouTube and entertainment there. Has entertainment on YouTube and that platform seemed to shift rightward, in your view?
I completely agree with everything Lucas said. I mean, YouTube is a little different in the sense that, like, you can turn around content much more quickly to meet the moment. I think that internet content is always sort of a reflection of culture and cultural values. YouTube has, I mean, some of these big YouTube creators helped deliver Trump the win, like the Nelk Boys and these other people that, you know, they played a big role in Trump's messaging. And that's not a new, they're not, you know, they didn't just become conservative overnight.
Yeah. I want to get into some examples that kind of might better show how our politics is changing entertainment. And for me, the biggest story of that so far this year has been all of the hoopla over Disney's Snow White live-action reboot. This movie, an adaptation of an American classic, has been politicized for years. Some of the country says it was too woke. A lot of folks I felt like didn't care, but altogether, this movie from Disney became a conversation about Palestine and wokeness and a lot of other things, and then it kind of flopped. What should I take from that story, big picture for the rest of entertainment, or should I take anything from that story at all?
Well, it's probably one of the last in this line of Disney live-action remakes of their animated classics. There was this concerted strategy from the Bob Iger, the CEO of Disney, on down to take, you know, Aladdin, Lion King, Snow White, all these animated movies that had been such hits for them and reinvent them, and it had been very successful. But then in the last sort of 5 to 7 years, you had a couple of these examples where I think in an effort to sort of promote diversity, they recast roles that had historically, or at least in the animation, been white with people of color in the lead role. So you had that with The Little Mermaid, where they had Halle Bailey play Ariel. You had that with Snow White with Rachel Zegler, and it was controversial in both cases. And what Disney has said, and Bob Iger has said, is that they probably pushed that too far for their liking, right? Like Disney's such an interesting case study because it's this company and this brand that tries to appeal to everyone, right? It wants to be non-political.
Which
and
is
that's
increasingly hard to
almost
do.
impossible to do now,
Yeah.
right? So they got in a big fight with Ron DeSantis in Florida
Over the Don't Say Gay bill.
the Don't Say Gay bill. And then with these movies, and I think what they've said, and I think what Disney is doing here is probably emblematic of what's happening across Hollywood right now, is like they felt like maybe they sort of forced diversity into these stories that they didn't need to, and that instead of sort of taking Little Mermaid and making her black, they should just find a great black story. Now, it's one thing for them to say that. You don't see a lot of Disney stories with black people at the center of them.
Doing it.
But I think that is where that was sort of Snow White has become emblematic of what has been 3 to 5 years of Disney at the center of the culture wars and trying to figure out how it can continue to be a brand that appeals to all people.
Yeah. How do you feel about this?
I think I once again agree with everything Lucas said, but I also think that it's interesting just the way that Disney is constantly in the center, like it's weaponized. And I think it's like this symbol of American entertainment and media. And there's just so much, it's just easy, like clickbait too, to generate controversy over these moments. And I think like if the movie does well, then it's like, they can make a storyline out of that. If the movie falters, they can say it's about woke. Like it's sort of, it just becomes like the center of a lot of this conversation, and it just drives a lot of interest.
Yeah. And I guess my question is, independent of all of the noise, was that movie going to be successful anyways?
Yeah.
Because of the character, I don't know people who are super excited to see a Snow White movie, right?
This is the thing. This is what I can't
There's
tell.
no fandom around it.
Is a lot of what's happening with the big studios and the major entertainment players about Trump and politics? Or is it actually about is what you're making good or bad and what folks want to see? Who was asking for a Snow White reboot? Who was asking for a reboot that had all the dwarves be CGI? Is that the bigger issue than the woke or unwoke of it? I can't tell.
I'm not a believer that the scandal over it being too woke or whatever is the reason why the movie didn't do well. I think the movie didn't do well. I think the movie didn't do well because nobody wanted to see a Snow White reboot. The performance of those live action remakes has been going down over the years, right? So Little Mermaid, which was seen as not very successful,
it made $100 million first weekend.
It made, I think, worldwide between $500 and $600 million. Snow White,
that sounds like a lot of money,
right? Not in Disney terms, but yes, a lot. Snow White made, I think, half that, if that.
Okay.
The Lion King, made well more than $1 billion. Like that, Lion King is a movie.
I forgot there was a Lion King
but
reboot.
Lion King...
They did a live action remake and then they did Mufasa.
I just think also the entertainment, the entertainment ecosystem continues to shift so much, and like Lucas said, I don't think this movie would have done well with or without the woke stuff. I think there's not as far as I've seen online, and not a super organic fandom. It's such an old movie. Like Lion King there's nostalgia there. Even The Little Mermaid, it feels more relevant.
Yeah.
This just seemed very strange.
Yeah, because so much of our culture right now, I feel like, is trading on that 80s and 90s nostalgia.
Yeah.
But Snow White is disconnected from that.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So we're talking about movies, we're talking about YouTube and streamers. But what I've noticed that I feel like is kind of undercovered, like the classic broadcast networks, their sitcoms, their TV shows, they're already kind of moving rightward.
What's even on that?
I read that A&E is bringing back Duck Dynasty. There's a Tim Allen show on network that's been pretty conservative. And Bill Maher is even bringing on Trump surrogates like Kid Rock. Are we actually missing a larger rightward shift in entertainment on these traditional networks?
I think the only people watching those things are old people that are still cable subscribers.
Yes.
Like, I
Which
think
is
that's the
allowed.
audience there.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying, like, in terms of programming,
Mhm.
I imagine that they're catering to an inherently older audience. And that might
Yeah.
be that. I don't know that Bill Maher is indicative of that, other than like, that maybe this tracks his own political evolution.
Mhm.
But I don't know that he's like responding to Trump necessarily.
Yeah.
I don't know about the sitcoms. I mean,
Okay.
I don't.
Yeah, I'm
That's
not.
fine.
The Duck Dynasty and the Tim Allen were both used in this Wall Street Journal piece about sort of this rightward shift that I will preface this by saying that I really like and respect the author of that piece. I didn't really buy the premise of it, though.
What's the premise in your
That
mind?
this idea that there's sudden, I mean, it's a little bit of what we talked about with 2016, right? Like
Yeah.
after 2016, there was a concerted effort to program for Trump voters. I don't think that's what we're seeing here. I think you bring back Duck Dynasty because Duck Dynasty was super successful. And like we just talked about with Lion King, Hollywood companies just reboot the shit that works,
Yes,
right?
Lion King works.
Same deal with Tim Allen. Tim Allen has been on hit shows on broadcast. Might not be your taste, might not be my taste, but he's been a star for a long time. I do think what you see, I mean, to Taylor's point, right? Like, so there's a specific audience that still watches broadcast. It tends to be older. And so they're just the shows that work on broadcast continue to work. And I think you've seen not just on broadcast, but even on streaming, like a shift to more conservative, not politically, but sort of careful shows like procedurals and medical shows and cop shows and
Because everyone likes those, right?
right.
They
But-
play to anyone.
And some of those are maybe by their nature a little more also politically conservative than kind of a more boundary pushing show would be.
Okay. Another example that I'm trying to figure out what to make of it was this White Lotus story. So we all survived season 3 of The White Lotus.
We're living in it right now.
We're
Yeah.
living in The White Lotus right now. Welcome. And we found out once the show was ending that Mike White, who writes the show, had planned to have one of the characters have a storyline in which that character's child is trans and was dealing with that. That ends up being cut from the entire show. We never see it in The White Lotus. And in an interview afterwards, Mike White says, I took that out because politically the vibes were off.
Did he say he acknowledged that?
Yeah.
That's interesting because I was ready to say that was not why they would take it out. I feel like there's so much on the cutting room floor. I mean, there was also that storyline that got cut where like the girl was supposed to lose her virginity, right? Like to Zion, I think the son. I just think like so much gets left on the cutting room floor with these
Always.
shows.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, I guess he said that he didn't want it to be a hot button issue. But at the same time, I don't know that would have necessarily added to the story either. And I feel like if it was a compelling enough storyline, maybe they would have been able to take that risk.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Am I taking too much from this then?
No, maybe if he acknowledged it, then maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, this one's so tough to answer because you do need to have seen the scripts and been in the writer's
Exactly.
room, and it's like,
Well,
okay,
there's no writer room,
you?
it's just Mike.
Yeah, did you? Right, exactly. Did you cut it just because you thought that it would be sort of politically combustible and you didn't want that to overwhelm discussion of your show, or did you cut it because that was one of the issues, but also it didn't quite work? And I don't know the answer. Now, if you see what you have to look for is that pattern of kind of cutting trans storylines out of these stories, or
It's kind of a pattern because
Yeah.
Disney also with the Pixar cartoon
right,
last
Yeah,
year did the
yeah.
same thing.
right.
And with that situation, the person that was voicing the character, in real life they are trans, and the character was supposed to be trans, but they just took that away from the character.
Right.
And the voice was still trans. So, I mean, is it a pattern or does 2 make a pattern?
You know, as silly as it sounds, usually in our business, you say you got to get to 3 to have a
Okay.
pattern. I guess
Okay.
the counter to that would be, and this got commissioned and made before then, but we just had one of the major Oscar contenders of this past year star a trans performer. Now,
Yeah.
wasn't super that movie.
Oh, you're talking about
that
Amelia
movie,
Perez?
Yes, that movie was very divisive in the trans
That
community.
movie's
I'm
on
aware.
a different planet.
Correct.
I don't know if Amelia Perez fits into any other conversation.
It
was
may-
such a strange film.
It may not, but you still have the biggest or one of the biggest entertainment companies in the world buying and then promoting and competing for Oscars with a story with a trans character at the center, even if the trans community had real issues with the film. I do think that like Netflix bought that at Cannes last year. I'd be so curious, given this conversation, you know, I guess
they
the
buy
question
it
is,
this
would
year?
they buy it in 2025, right?
I would venture to say that they might not, because it's even touchier now. I also found it very interesting when Amelia Perez did win the few Oscars it did get. The people from that film's team who came on stage to get those Oscars didn't mention trans rights or trans issues at all in their speeches.
Right.
They kind of ignored it. And this is from the same group of Oscar folks that were yelling resist 8 years ago.
Well, all of that resistance was nonsense. I mean, I've argued. I think that so much of that resist sort of energy in 2017 to 2020, I think that it was performative, basically. And I think it was like sort of they were going with the culture at the time. But I don't think I don't.
Well, this gets at one of the other, because so I talk to people in the entertainment business about this subject somewhat regularly, and I asked a couple of them recently. I was like, "Do you think that they've gotten that, you know, sort of we're shying away from these storylines?" And one of the things that they brought up was, you know, post. It was a little after what you're talking about, not so much the Trump era, but after the murder of George Floyd, there were a lot of kind of efforts to improve diversity in media entertainment. You had all these programs that got set up, right? Like pipelines to develop talent. And then after 2 or 3 years, they just shut them down, right?
Yeah.
And this happened before Trump. It happened. It was really like 22 and 23. And I think one of the big issues that happens in all of these industries, music, film, TV, creators, is you view sort of diverse storytelling as something that you need to do for social reasons as opposed to it being good for business. And the companies that get that it's good for business are the ones that don't shy away from it, keep doing it, but also don't feel they need to talk about it all the time because it's just smart, right?
This is the thing.
Whereas the ones who just set up a program because they want people to like say nice things about them on Instagram are the ones who are never going to be committed to it.
This is the thing that I always question. So we've known now for decades that when it comes to people who still go to the movies, per capita, the most loyal film-going community in America are young Latinos. They over-index, and they always have. And you'd assume, knowing that you'd just have more Hollywood films in theaters with people who look like them. And that hasn't happened. And that is an issue that was existing before Donald Trump, you know? And I wonder, when Trump is in office, do you see companies even thinking about that still, or avoiding that entire question of just making the content quietly to appeal to various audiences? Or are they now in kind of reaction mode and just trying to make sure they don't seem woke? Sorry, this is a rambly question.
I don't know that it doesn't feel like they have been intentionally targeting that audience that much to begin with. Like, the examples of it are always sort of exceptions to the rule, right? So one of the reasons that the Fast and Furious franchise has been so successful is it seems to appeal to all people, right? Like it's a very diverse cast.
It's international.
They did not, I don't think that they intentionally engineered it to be the one franchise that brings everyone together, but it did, right? It just sort of naturally grew out of what they were doing. You know, you'll have, you know, Coco was a big deal for Pixar, right? Because it was like the one Pixar movie that appealed to told a Latin story. But
it did very well.
Yeah, it did very well. Then you had Encanto, which was
which will never go away. I feel like those songs are still in the ether.
But I don't know that you're seeing people directly lean into it or lean away from it. It doesn't feel like a big priority for these studios at this point to focus on that audience. They just assume that audience will show up to a lot of the movies that they make. And the one superhero movie that came out, I think it was last year, that sort of had a Latino star didn't actually do that well. And so
Which one?
It was Blue Beetle.
Wait, what was that?
I haven't heard of that one.
Blue Beetle. This was like in the Marvel
DC
cinematic DC.
Yeah.
Oh, it was during pandemic.
No, came
During
out last
lockdown.
year.
Huh.
if I remember correctly.
You're
now
probably
you're going to
right.
make me need to look this up.
No, it's fine.
But-
It's fine. It's fine. Yeah.
I mean, I don't even know what the Blue Beetle
Yeah.
is.
Well, that's maybe the issue is nobody knows what the Blue Beetle is.
Yeah.
But DC had a terrible year last. I mean, The Flash didn't work. Aquaman 2 didn't work. There was no DC movie that really worked.
Yeah. Can I bring up another example that I think might speak to how our politics is shaping entertainment? SNL and country's biggest star, Morgan Wallen. Whalen? How do you say it? Morgan Wallen.
Yeah.
Morgan Wallen. Okay. How do I set this up? He was a musical guest on SNL a few weeks ago. This was after previous controversy when he was on years ago. But he finished his songs, and at the end of the show, usually the guest and the host all come out with the cast, and they clap and they hug, and he's there hanging out. This time, he left abruptly and then posted a photo of his private jet with the caption, "Get me back to God's country." This was seen to be like some flare-up of the culture wars. Was it?
Well, it was definitely I mean, people used it as that.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm always like contrarian on this
Okay.
stuff just because I think the internet like loves a narrative and they love to like take some like ultimately meaningless little slight or perceived slight and then, blow it out of proportion.
Mhm.
I don't know that he was, I mean, maybe he wasn't a fit. Maybe he wanted to get the hell out of there, whatever. I don't know that that's like some huge thing the way people were treating it as. Like maybe he didn't want to do it. He got booked on it. He had to do it. He felt like it, you know what I mean? He wanted to get home. I don't know. Like,
Yeah.
but I think that it was seen, it was definitely used as a sort of a way to talk about all this stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I would suspect that there were issues between Morgan Wallen and the sort of cast and crew at Saturday Night Live. There was kind of a healthy tension there, which is why he got the hell out. The Get Me Back to God's Country just feels, we're going to keep coming back to this word, but it just feels very performative, right?
Well, he was writing "Get Me Back to God's Country," meaning Tennessee, as he was about to board his private jet.
Right. He is a
Insane.
member of the elite. He has made tens of millions of dollars. He's one of the most successful recording acts of the last 5 years. The whole scandal that engulfed him a few years ago had absolutely no impact on people listening to his music or going to his tour, mostly because I think the people in his core audience didn't care. Like that was a big drama.
And there were like two scandals. He didn't mask before SNL when we all were trying to mask. There's also video of him maybe saying a word he shouldn't have said.
Yes.
From years ago.
That's the one I remember because that was where, if memory serves, some of his kind of representatives in the entertainment business distanced themselves from him
for a few months.
temporarily. Yeah, temporarily.
Yeah.
And then they're like, "Oh wait, actually, you're still going to make us a lot of money, so we're good."
Yeah.
So yeah, I think he's just playing to the base. I mean, so many of these people now, it's like because we are not. I mean, we were talking about Disney trying to remain apolitical, right? There was a time at which, some stars still do this, where you are trying to appeal to a monoculture, right? You want everyone to like you, but we have had an evolution where most people don't care about that anymore.
And it doesn't exist.
Right.
Like it's very
even
hard
Taylor
to find.
Swift, right? Like Taylor Swift for the longest time tried to be monoculture, and she would not indulge in politics.
Yeah.
Now she has. Now she's done so very carefully. I think she's done so in a way where
But very vocally.
Yes.
She said how she votes.
But she is like one of the only people who has managed to do that without pissing off a lot of people in the process.
Huh.
But I think the number of stars who do that are at this point are few and far between. And so he's just speaking to the people who care about him, and he doesn't really care about everyone else.
I was just going to say, I just think it's also like that. I think that the internet has enabled that shift and like influencer culture has enabled that shift. And it is so much about cultivating this base fandom. And as long as you have your fandom, you're uncancelable, right?
Yeah.
And that's what it feels like, pandering.
Which makes it hard to even assess if all of entertainment is going left or right, because there's no more all of entertainment. This monoculture is shattered. People have niche audiences. And so you're just trying to stay in your lane and protect your lane.
But I will say that the right has significantly more audience online, I would argue, right?
Yeah.
Like, and it's interesting, like I noticed even, or somebody posted about this on Threads, they were getting all these ads, like the right-wing content is so often boosted and promoted, and they have a lot of paid media behind their channels and things like that I think that a lot on the left like don't have.
Do we think that the right has more of a following online, or just that that culturally the right is more ascendant now, and so it seems that way? Because if you'd asked people 5 years ago, you probably would have said that internet culture was more left-leaning.
Yeah.
I think a lot of folks would say all of culture is left-leaning.
Right.
I think that was the accepted
that's
dogma
what they
for a
used
long
to
time.
say. And they still say it, and that's why they built this entire infrastructure on the internet, right? Is because they felt like they didn't control traditional media and traditional entertainment. I agree with you, Lucas. I think this is what I was talking about before. I think in 2018, if you were making resistance content, like you were going to see that pop. But I also think that there's been a really concerted and strategic effort on the right to build up that online media. And
not just call it politics, like you were saying.
Yeah.
Is it politics? Is it entertainment? The line is blurred.
Yeah, and I think that they've really tried to stake out more of a space and sort of take up more space in the entertainment world and on the internet.
Some of it is also just adoption, right? So you look at the people who were the first to be using the internet, using YouTube, using podcasts, using all these. It's a younger generation, and while it's different right now, by and large, historically speaking, a younger generation has been more left-leaning. It's also been more it starts in the big cities and then filters out, and so I think a lot of the early people are maybe more liberal or left-leaning, and then as it gets more and more deeply penetrated, because you think about it, so like in talk radio, conservatives ruled talk radio for the longest time, right? But
my driver's ed teacher, when I was in high school, only played Rush Limbaugh.
There you go.
I learned how to drive
listening to
Rush Limbaugh.
And that's why you're such a good driver.
Sure. Sorry, go ahead.
No. Early podcasts, I think, generally more left, but as time has gone on, and all you had different sort of conservative talkers who go, oh no, like this is the new talk radio. We now need to be here. And now you look at the top 10, 20 podcasts, and the ones that are the talk genre are primarily conservatives.
Yeah, but they've always had a more personality-driven media ecosystem too.
Say more.
Well, I just mean back to the days of talk radio, like a lot of these conservative figures, like people have gravitated towards.
That's their medium. They talk. Yeah.
Yeah, and also I just think they have a more personality. It's more about personality. It's more about emotions. Like there's been a lot of discussion of that, of like the differences in content. Like a lot of like liberal content it's sort of like not scolding, but it's like fact check, whereas a lot of personality driven content on the right is more emotional, it's more feelings, it's more like vibes based, I guess.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I also wonder the role that like algorithms play in it, not in the podcast world as much, but a lot of those people that are big on podcasts now did get big because of YouTube too. And there is a lot of evidence that a lot of these platforms have rewarded right-leaning content in their algorithms.
Yeah.
I don't know. E.J. Dixon just wrote a story for New York Magazine this week about the tween podcast market, which is growing.
Tween podcast market?
Yeah. So, 10,
how old are they?
11, 12,
and they're
13-year-olds. Yes. MD
Take
Foodie
my job.
Boys.
Come and get it.
But it's interesting to see, and some of them are like already kind of industry plants. Like one of them that has like a famous kind of right-wing influencer dad who's.
Wait, stop. We got to pause to acknowledge this fully. There's a podcast market with 10 to 12-year-old hosts. And we're already hearing reports that some of those young hosts are industry plants.
Well, yeah, because they have access to like podcasting equipment in a podcasting studio, and like
so we're talking industry plant or more like nepo baby.
Nepo baby is probably a better, I guess. Nepo baby. I don't know that Fox
Can you describe
News
one of these
podcast
hosts for me?
Well, so there's a range of podcasts, and a lot of them are like the MD Foodie Boys is not overtly political, but they love
Foodie Boys.
MD Foodie Boys.
Okay.
They have hundreds of thousands of followers, and they're doing big time brand deals with Chipotle, with Taco Bell, right? And they're not overtly political, but what I think EJ does a good job of is sort of talking about is like they lionize Dave Portnoy. They love Theo Vaughn. Their dad listens to Rogan. They already have done a collab with Barstool.
Barstool Sports.
Yes, they perform, they're children, but they're performing this sort of idea of masculinity that is sort of maybe inherently more right-leaning. I'm not trying to like cancel these children. I just want to make this
children.
clear. They're not political. They literally discuss, which brand of do they like, chicken fingers at lunch? But it's interesting to see, especially as you see these younger and younger kids building a platform and companies like Pocket Watch investing investing in the tween podcast market, advertisers investing. These are kids that are building audiences very young. It'll be interesting to see their political development.
Yeah.
And then there's the it's the GS something podcast, which is the overtly political one where it went viral because it was a bunch of like 12 to 14-year-olds discussing tariffs. And they're huge Trump supporters.
Oh.
I mean, they're openly Trump supporter. They're political. And I don't know. I just think it's interesting, like the different like media climates and sort of the impact, also like the downstream impact of these big conservative voices and who looks up to them.
Yeah. What would you say that landscape will look like 3 or 4 years from now if we're having a conversation about politics and
we need Ashley
how it
Carmen
shapes entertainment?
here.
Yeah. Like, are we entering a world that seems where like more and more of these lines are blurred and there's no need to appeal to a monoculture because it's gone? So we'll just see more of these segments in YouTube spaces. And if so, do they become more political over time or apolitical over time?
Well, I think we just saw in this past election that a lot of these content creators are happy to be political, right?
Yeah.
They're not going to like lose a lot by being political. If they've cultivated a specific audience, they can sort of steer that audience in the way they want.
It's so weird to think about that because I think there's a sense in culture right now that people are exhausted by politics.
Yes.
And yet Trump, because he's so polarizing and consumes so much of the media's attention, makes it very hard to not be political in conversation.
Mm-hmm.
But I think when you look at what people are going to want to watch and listen to and read, it's going to be by and large stuff that's not political. They're going to look for escape.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what works really well right now. Podcasting is a little bit different because that's like radio. And even if it's entertainment, there's an aspect of it that's always going to be tied into news.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of the pop culture we see will shift away from politics.
Question from that then, for both of you. In this midst of our current politics, what entertainment that you're consuming is doing that the best? Offering the best distraction, being good and fun, and removed from it?
I watch a lot of like brain rot content.
Tell me.
I don't know,
Like what?
like Italian brain rot. The tralaleo,
Italian brain
tralala.
rot.
Italian brain
familiar
rot.
with-
And I don't know
It's
what
an
Italian
entire
brain rot is.
genre. Bombadiro, crocodilo. Those. Have you guys seen these videos?
No, where are
It's
they?
like a big genre on Instagram Reels. There's like all these storylines. Well, this is something I'm interested in. I was curious, like this is totally off topic,
Yeah.
but like I noticed that there's a lot more like serialized narrative content that's AI generated on Reels, like the John Pork stuff as well. Like, like that
No,
lore.
what is this?
There's a whole storyline around John Pork, who's this meme character, a human with like a pig head, and then he was assassinated by Simon Cheese, who's another AI generated character. But
Who is this for adults or kids?
it's for children, undeniably. But like,
Okay.
I mean, just to be clear, like I'm pretty sure it's all children consuming it. But it's these sort of like crowdsourced, serialized storylines that different influencers will sort of like insert themselves in. Like this one guy who calls himself Agent 5.5, like he's an actual influencer who has inserted himself into this story. And everybody has the agreed upon story. And there is a clear storyline to it and characters around it. And the characters have lore. And I think that's been interesting to see on Reels because it really
Instagram
is a
Reels.
Reels phenomenon. And I think it's the amount of AI generated content on Reels.
And it's not like TikTok's just going over to Reels. It's Reels just for
No.
Reels.
It's really Reels. I think Reels. I think brain rot AI stuff like it has a lock. I think TikTok is actually more like high-minded like discourse.
Yeah.
I mean, there's always been collaborative storytelling on TikTok, and maybe
Yeah.
that's it.
Yeah.
But it's just been, I don't know, like people are always thinking of like, oh, what's the future of entertainment? Is it just going to be a bunch of AI stories? And I think we already are seeing a lot of that on Reels, and you're seeing these narratives. It's not just like a
Totally.
one-off, right?
Can I confess to you my Instagram Reels brain rot?
Yeah.
So I have been thinking a lot about how I want, like you're saying, Lucas, to have entertainment that is apolitical. Like there's sometimes I've gone through my day and I've watched all the news and I've consumed all the news, and I want what I watch at home to be completely removed from like this world. And what gives me that are these Instagram Reels of Midwestern women making the worst casseroles you could possibly imagine. Do y'all watch some of these?
No.
Yes.
There's one, her name is
Wait.
Elaine Carroll. Elaine Carroll's Kitchen.
Is this the one where they put like potato chips and then they put like
They turn potato chips into mashed potatoes. They take things out of a can that should not go together and just bake them and see what happens. And she mispronounces words on purpose, and she's always saying, "You gotta try it," and it's like weird. And I cannot tell if she is in on the joke or not, and that's why I love it. But there are many hours where instead of watching a movie or a TV show, I'll watch Elaine Carroll's Kitchen for a long time. And I'm like, oh, that's my new entertainment. That's my new TV show. Like, my favorite TV show is Elaine Carroll's Horrible Kitchen.
Well,
It's
that's why,
wild.
isn't that why like Netflix is saying like that they're competing with TikTok and stuff? Like that's why all these,
Yeah.
it's all competing for the same
So
eyeballs.
what are they saying, Netflix? It's like,
They've got their messaging around YouTube conveys fear because the co-CEO Ted Sarandos made these comments at an event last month or earlier this month, I forget which, and he said that he I think recycled these old tropes about YouTube, which is that YouTube is for sort of time killing. Or it was something along
Yeah.
the lines of like, if you want to enjoy yourself or really like use your time, you watch Netflix. But if you want to kill time, you watch
if
YouTube.
I really want to use my time, I watch Love is Blind season 8. That's really going to edify
and
me.
it's not it's a BS claim but it speaks to he is trying to differentiate and sort of keep YouTube suppressed because YouTube has just been stealing more and more mind share from kind of traditional entertainment companies. And I think Reels has grown a lot. I'm still a little more traditional in that when I don't get me wrong, I've spent plenty of time waste plenty of time on Instagram. But if I want to escape, I'm way more likely to watch sports or film or TV than I am to like just sit on my phone because I don't feel great after spending all that time on my phone.
I get that.
So
then when you watch sports, is this conversation even happening at all? This chat about politics and entertainment.
No,
is the sports
you're just
world
watching freak athletes do amazing things.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Anywho, to wrap this up, I want to ask you both to make one prediction on where you see entertainment and media going in the next few years, based on our chat about politics and if it's there or not and what's up and what's down. One prediction from you both.
You go first, Lucas.
I mean, I'm going to make the boring prediction, which is that all this stuff is cyclical. And so I think that right now you have entertainment running away from politics, but also reflecting a kind of a rightward shift in our culture, and that there will almost inevitably be a backlash to what is happening right now because that's what happens every 4 years. And we'll probably be having a very different conversation about sort of the relationship between entertainment and politics, either before the next election, maybe even like if the negative reaction to the tariffs sustains and that has an impact on the midterms. I just think it'll look different. I don't think any of this stuff is ever permanent.
Yeah.
I guess my prediction is kind of like, I don't know. I am fascinated, I think, because I cover AI stuff.
Yeah.
And there's such a reactive movement against it now where if you use AI, people get really upset, like on Blue Sky or, some of these other spaces. But the adoption that I've seen and the way people, especially on YouTube Shorts and Instagram and stuff, like I just am seeing more and more AI content and people loving it. People really getting invested in it. People investing in AI characters. And I just see that becoming more and more of a thing. I went for the first time ever on a studio tour of
Which studio?
Of Warner Brothers.
Fun.
Never seen anything like that before. Never been on like a traditional set. And we went to the prop. They showed the prop thing where they go and they get like physical objects and they put it on the set. And I would have never thought they did that. I thought that was already like mostly CGI or something.
What do you mean, like in reference to?
It just seems so like analog to like go and like get a physical thing and then like bring it to the set and then like that's what you put on the film set. Like I just thought like they're probably digitizing most of it already.
Yeah.
And so I was kind of interested to see that they don't digitize that stuff. And I just think with AI, that to me, I was like, whoa, this whole thing, and don't cancel me. I'm not like pro AI or whatever.
It's
I'm not
fine.
anti,
Say
I
what
don't
you
know.
wanna say.
I just think like there's a lot of stuff that can easily be swapped out. The tech is going to get really good. I think people, if you're making the stuff now, you'll be able to easily switch up a set really easily. And I just think that that's going to be the future. That's not even revolutionary to say, but I think I'm so in this like anti-AI soup that it just seems out of touch.
Yeah.
I feel like AI is going to have a really big impact on visual effects and animation and be really important on social platforms because it will reduce the barrier to entry in production,
Yeah.
much as YouTube and other platforms did in distribution. I don't think it's going to have the dramatic impact on the high-end entertainment
agree
that
with
people
that.
think it will.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Other than the like the what it might optimize for visual effects or like dubbing in some random countries, I don't think you're suddenly going to be seeing like Disney make a bunch of AI movies.
I don't think they're going to like shut down their prop department at these big studios. But
Yeah.
I do think that for the average content creator,
You're going to use AI a lot more.
150 million
Why not?
percent.
And it's getting better.
I
Yeah.
also think, speaking of dubbing, I interviewed Darman. You probably know who Darman
I
is.
do.
This big content creator at an event last week, and he was saying that the cost of dubbing has down. It was $200,000 for him to dub a couple years ago, like all his content in multiple languages. Now it's less than 2,000, and that some of these platforms might be doing like auto dubbing with soon to other languages, and so it actually is a benefit to cultivate this global fan base. You can monetize it much more easily in a way that you couldn't. And I think that's interesting too when you see people, these big creators doing these global tours.
Totally. My prediction for myself and my consumption of entertainment is probably until the end of time, I will be watching people cook badly on some social platform. I can't stop.
You're going to start
I love
making
it.
some of that stuff, aren't you?
I'd have to cook.
Can I raise a topic that we didn't touch on? And if it doesn't fit in, it's
Oh my
fine.
God, it's
but I
fine.
just realized. So when we were talking about the kind of growing conservative leaning in entertainment, one subject that we didn't really touch on, and I don't know why, the dubbing made me think of it. Like one of the big changes we've seen over the last 5 or 10 years has been this explosion in consumption of media from other countries. We watch way more television from Korea, Japan, Latin America, what have you.
France. I really loved that Netflix show Lupin.
Yeah. And it's not just television, right? Because that's also what YouTube and TikTok and others enable, because you can follow creators from anywhere in the world, and dubbing will continue to get better. So that's one area where I guess the sort of Trump reaction to that would be like America first, right? But I don't see people necessarily rejecting that entertainment from
Not at
other
all.
places.
Or even thinking about Trump when they're watching it.
And if anything, I think because of improvements in dubbing, subtitling, all the technology around it, you'll probably only see more of it, especially because producing in other countries is cheaper. So anyways,
I think that's a really good point, and I totally agree.
Yeah.
And in terms of producing in other countries too, so many more content creators now have global teams, or they shoot stuff in, like they have editors in Egypt, or they have like all these people because it's so much cheaper.
Really? All right. So the real conversation about where entertainment is headed is bigger than just Trump and bigger than just this last election. It's global. It's fragmented. So stay tuned. That's the perfect way to end it. Tell folks one last time who you are and where to find you.
I'm Lucas Shaw. You can find me over at Bloomberg and read my newsletter, Screen Time.
Yeah.
I'm Taylor Lorenz, and you can subscribe to my newsletter at usermag.co. That's usermag.co. And subscribe to my YouTube.
Yes.
Speaking of YouTube.
Yes. I love it. Thank y'all so much. Come back anytime. Sign the beach ball so we know that you were here.
I love that.